Bum, 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 bum.
Good day and welcome. This is Orange20 and I'm Joey. I've been wanting to start making videos around role-playing games for a while now. The first topic I want to tackle is introducing new people into the hobby, both as game masters and as players. My first advice to anyone considering jumping in is to just jump in. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. A lot of things on this channel may change in the future, but that is future Joey's problem. And based on my experience, he's kind of a dick, so screw him. Today we're going to be talking about one-shots. These are self-contained stories that resolve in a single play session, maybe over a couple of nights. If you're not familiar, it's kind of like the difference between a movie, where everything is introduced, happens, and ends in a few hours, and an ongoing series that comes back week after week, snakes around a bit, takes its time, showing you the setting, the characters, and the world. If you want to try your hand at running the game, this is a great way to start out. You've got low overhead, a short time commitment, and if it doesn't work for you, you only have to do it once. If you've got friends interested in trying Dungeons & Dragons or any other game for the first time, this is a great low-pressure way to start them out. I've had a lot of friends who knew I ran a weekly game. They saw me doing this week after week. Letting them know that if they wanted to try it out, they could come play for one night, and everything would be resolved before they left set them at ease. They didn't have to worry about this taking up a big chunk of their life going forward. It's just one evening, and if they don't like it, they never have to play again. But usually they do want to play again. If you're not familiar, it's kind of like the difference between a movie, where everything is introduced, happens, and ends in a few hours, and an ongoing series that comes back week after week, snakes around a bit, takes its time, showing you the setting, the characters, and the world. If you want to try your hand at running the game, this is a great way to start out. You've got low overhead, a short time commitment, and if it doesn't work for you, you only have to do it once. If you've got friends interested in trying Dungeons & Dragons or any other game for the first time, this is a great low-pressure way to start them out. I've had a lot of friends who knew I ran a weekly game. They saw me doing this week after week. Letting them know that if they wanted to try it out, they could come play for one night, and everything would be resolved before they left set them at ease. They didn't have to worry about this taking up a big chunk of their life going forward. It's just one evening, and if they don't like it, they never have to play again. But usually they do want to play again. First of all, you're going to want to lean into archetypes. You have to establish a setting, establish characters, and get to the plot, and have everyone home in a couple of hours. You could write them an intricate 20-page backstory and expect them to read it before they get there, but people will not stick around and play that game. Your goal is to make it accessible. You can think about it a lot like The Lord of the Rings. The books were around for a long time, and while they had a whole bunch of fans, you found a whole lot more people joined when they made them into movies that you could get through in just a couple of hours with a lot less effort. They had to cut out the appendices, and Tom Bombadil, and a bunch of stuff like the songs that could get kind of hard to read because it didn't fit into 3 hours. That's okay. There is a reason no one has ever read the Silmarillion. If you say you've read the Silmarillion, you're a liar. You're a liar in the comment section down below. That book is boring. It is not worth anyone's time. Your one-shot probably won't be a complex, multifaceted world. If you try to tell the story of an elven empire with complex politics because they are a bastion of individuality, where power players use intricate magics to control the skyways, while fighting against a vicious dwarven underground of clockwork theologists who try to desperately impose order, and the fickle humans caught in between, seeking only safety and comfort, you have too much to explain in one night. Your time is limited, and you need to use every shortcut you can. You need to let your players get to the interesting stuff of actually trying the game. They came to play, so let them get out on the field and... sports metaphor. What you're going to want to do is lean into archetypes. Make a typical country village with a typical fat friendly innkeeper and a typical bewildered mayor seeking desperately to find any sort of help. This may seem a little boring, but you want to use these archetypes to establish tone. Jaws is a great example of how to make one-shots work with archetypes. You start with a greedy man who will stop at nothing to keep the beaches open. There's a monster in the water. The mayor hires a grizzled veteran and a bewildered academic. They set them loose on the problems. The setting, a resort town, the corrupt mayor, all of the characters, and most of the aspects of the plot, they're all actually pretty boilerplate. We're just using them to get to awesome shark fights. People remember awesome shark fights. The Great Arcadium can deal with the Church of Subterranea in a later game, when you have more time and you can really explore those topics.
The damn sun is chasing me. Second, I recommend using pre-generated characters. For a lot of players, this will be the first time, and you want to find as many ways as you can to take it easy on them. One way to do this is to offer them ready-made characters. While a lot of the fun of any RPG will always be making your own hero, when you've got 4 to 6 people over and just a few hours to get through the whole story, you need to find ways to cut a few corners. I recommend to have the sheets ready, laid out on the table, and each has a quick description of the characters at the top, again leaning into archetypes. Thorin, the brave fighter, Vadala, the clever rogue, Alistair, the wise wizard, and Sister Carissa, the beloved cleric. And cleric is one of those archetypes from fantasy RPGs that you don't see in other fiction. It can be a bit hard to explain why a priest is wearing heavy armor and smacking people with a mace. Video games have made this a bit easier, but of those 4 archetypes, that's the one I would cut at first. I actually generally want to put out a few more characters than there are players. So for a one-shot for 4 players, I will generally throw 6 characters on the table. That way, even the last person to pick gets to choose from 3 options. These characters generally won't need more than about a paragraph of backstory. You want to know who they were before they entered the sphere of the adventure, why they're going to be taking part in the adventure. I also like to give the players established reasons to work together. So sometimes what I'll do is they were all hired, often independently, by the same boss, and they're told they have to work together if they want the money that they're being offered. But I also like to do things like have them be family. And some players love to play siblings, or parents and children, or couples, and they often will pick the characters based on that element of the backstory, not really looking at their abilities or who the character is outside that relationship. It's a quick, easy way, and it means that they get to rely on someone else if they're uncomfortable with role-playing. I'll often have characters have the backstory that they've done jobs together in the past, especially if it's something very archetypical, like make them buddy cops or partners in crime. Since you know the characters, you'll also want to include problems meant for each of them to solve. If someone plays the rogue, put in locked doors and traps. You probably don't want to put in too many because you don't want to emphasize the character, but I'd recommend putting in at least 2. So the first time you can warn them, do you want to search for traps? And the second time, they can tell you, oh, there's another door. I search for traps. If someone is playing the fighter, make sure you narrate how awesome they are in combat. They should look cooler in fighting because that's what they chose as the center. For a wizard, I would make sure that whatever spells you put on the sheet, the enemies they run into are bad at saving against them or take a lot of damage from that damage type. Sleep is most cool when almost all the kobolds fall asleep because of it, and it solves the entire encounter. If you are using more characters than players, make sure that the highlighted moments are optional, especially for some of the more difficult ones to solve if you don't have that type of character in the group. If there's no thief, there shouldn't be that many traps, and there should always be a key on the looted body so that a locked door doesn't end your progress. If there's a ranger in the pile, only put the tracking or wilderness chase scene in if someone picks that character. Make sure it's something that you can take out. Third, you want clear indicators of success to help the players understand that they're on the right track and to keep the story moving forward. You want to make sure they feel accomplished every step of the way. When they decide to answer the call to adventure, have the non-player characters show visible relief. After all, they've just engaged heroes, and the heroes are now going to solve the problem. They have nothing else to worry about at this point. When the characters come across something like a boss monster, make sure you indicate that this is truly a more important monster. You can do this by things like size, so the orc chieftain is a foot taller than all his followers. You can do this by description, like, he has a crown made from the broken skull of a dwarf, jagged and savage. And you can do this by reaction. All the other orcs step back and put a clenched fist to their hearts, waiting and watching. Then, especially in a one-shot, when that monster is defeated or that problem is solved, clearly show the players that they have won. All the other orcs surrender, or the walls of the temple begin to shake as you recover the heart of Alethor. You realize you're going to need to run to safety. Everyone make an athletics check. The kidnapped prince runs to your arms and cries, "It's over! It's finally over!" Make sure they know that they're a step farther, that they're a step closer to being done, and that they're doing the right thing, that the story is now further along. To be clear, I only do this on one-shots for new players. In a bigger game that's either ongoing or a one-shot for people who already like RPGs, I tend to leave things more open-ended. Maybe they didn't solve the whole problem. Maybe when they leave, Chief Grazik's hand will burst forth from the rubble in a clenched fist, an unspoken promise of revenge. But in a one-shot to introduce people, the hero should return triumphant and be completely certain of it. It's the medal ceremony from the end of Star Wars A New Hope, and you can only forget Chewie if he's an NPC, otherwise he needs a medal too. Otherwise, all the heroes are rewarded and feel universally loved for their accomplishments, and all their problems are solved, unless you get them back for a sequel. Moral ambiguity, jealousy, bitterness, and failure to complete all your goals are themes that deserve a longer game. And if the players want to come back, let them know that the bigger, darker problems of the world are out there, and they can solve those now. Fourth, maybe your favorite game isn't the best game to use to introduce people to role-playing games in general. I find that horror games actually work very, very well compared to Dungeons & Dragons. The point of most horror games is uncovering how the world of the game is so very different from our own world, because a lot of them will have a modern setting or a historical setting that's not as far-fetched from our own as an alternate world where there are gnomes in the forest that can cast illusions and you have to worry about dragons flying overhead. Instead, you need to figure out why things aren't what they seem. The thing that the characters don't know is also what the players don't know, and they are trying to uncover. A lot of it comes from the fact that ghost stories are a familiar social activity to so many people, and a ghost story where instead of just yelling, "Please don't go down in the basement," but having to make the decision on whether or not to go down in the basement to get out, becomes your own investment, your own part of the story. The base character concepts can be so much more familiar than they are in a fantasy game, so everybody knows what a bored rich kid or a down-on-their-luck private eye, an absent-minded professor, or an athlete who's aged out of their support is like from all kinds of media, where if you've got someone who isn't really that into fantasy to start with, they may not know the tough fighter or the nimble elf. One thing I would caution in a game like this is if you let someone play a pagan or an arcanist or a priest, they expect to have powers that work. You need to establish pretty early on, if your monsters can't be stopped by praying or crucifix, that this is not the case. And I actually often tend to lean away from characters that would assume that they have some control over the supernatural world. Most of the other advice in here works really well for those sort of problems, and you can steal a lot of inspiration from ghost stories. I've done one-shots where characters have moved into a new house and they aren't able to move away, and so they have to solve what's wrong with the house. Or your car breaks down in a town and you just put together a group of people that would all be in the same car
that now have to find a way to escape from the cult when they've been trapped in the town. It makes it really, really easy to find ways to use those archetypes, because horror is even worse than fantasy for relying on standard archetypes, but it is an easy and exciting way to show people a game, and then you can take them into, all right, well, if you like that, how'd you feel about doing it where we get to be wizards now? This episode of Orange 20 is brought to you by True Son of the Empire, the best book that I ever wrote. So I'll put a link down below if you want to support me in what I'm trying to do here. Feel free to buy a copy of the ebook, and I will find other ways to let you give me money in future. And if you want to buy some space on here, I will sell out so fast. I have no morals. I have nothing that's important to me that you can't buy.
Bum, bum, bum. Bum, 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 bum.
I bought this new camera, but I still have the same face, so I'm sorry you have to see it so clearly.